Hello, friend. Welcome back to your quiet space. Tonight, let's wander into a land where the rules are a little unusual, the kings are a little eccentric, and sleep comes gently, one strange law at a time. Close your eyes. Let your shoulders soften. There's no need to think, no need to hold on. The fire is glowing softly, and our story is about to begin. Once upon a very peculiar time, not quite ancient, not quite modern, there existed a small, peaceful kingdom nestled between two misty mountain ranges. It wasn't famous for its military might, or for its art, or for its gold. No, this little kingdom was known throughout the land for just one thing. Nobody was allowed to wear pants. Not peasants, not noblemen, not knights or bakers or tax collectors, not even the royal cat, Sir Whiskerbottom, who once had a tiny pair of ceremonial trousers sewn for him, and was promptly exiled to the castle attic for a week. The rule was not flexible. No pants, ever. That was the law, and the law was absolute. Now, you might wonder, why would any sane monarch make such a decree? Well, that's the story we're here to tell. It all began with King Baldric the Particular, ruler of the kingdom of Gaulandia, a man of strict habits and even stricter opinions about fashion. Baldric was not known for his kindness, nor for his wisdom, but he was known for his passionate hatred of two things: turnips' pants. He tolerated turnips only when they were thoroughly mashed and drowned in garlic butter. Pants, however, were a different matter entirely. The king claimed that pants were, quote, an insult to the freedom of one's knees. He believed that trousers, in all their stitched and buttoned forms, were the root of societal stiffness, both physically and spiritually. He would lecture anyone who would listen, waving a single bare leg in the air for emphasis. How can a man truly leap with joy if his legs are imprisoned in cloth prisons? He'd bellow. How can a baker kneel to his dough, a farmer lunge at his weeds, a child tumble down a hill, when bound by such oppression? And so, with a stroke of his royal quill, King Baldric issued his most famous edict, the first no-pants law of Gaulandia. Henceforth, all garments that cover the knees in a divided manner shall be banned. Robes, kilts, tunics, and flowing gowns are hereby declared the preferred attire of the people. Pants are forbidden. Violators shall be assigned to 3 days of public twirling in the marketplace, while wearing overly dramatic cloaks. The people were, understandably, confused. Some thought it was a joke. Others assumed the king had simply skipped lunch again. But when the royal guard raided the village tailor and set fire to the inventory of corduroy trousers, everyone realized the king was deadly serious. At first, there was mild rebellion. A group of teenagers formed an underground movement called the Trouser Resistance. They sewed forbidden pants under candlelight, holding secret meetings in a dusty wine cellar behind the bakery. One night, a whisper spread through the kingdom. A baker's apprentice had been caught wearing jeans. He was paraded through the capital, forced to wear a robe made entirely of feathers, and made to pirouette every time someone said corduroy. It was terribly awkward, and by the end of the day, no one ever wanted to risk pants again. Soon, the kingdom of Gaulandia became famous far and wide, not for its scholars, not for its warriors, but for its absolute and complete lack of pants. Travellers would visit just to see it for themselves. Tourists arrived wearing shorts, only to be handed flowing tunics at the border. A foreign ambassador once showed up in a 3-piece suit and was immediately assigned mandatory robbery education at the Royal School of Fabric Freedom. And yet, despite the oddity, life went on. Children still played in the hills. Farmers still planted wheat. Tailors became robe designers. And slowly people got used to it. In fact, the kingdom became rather proud of its new identity. They even held an annual festival, the Grand Day of Bare Knees. People would dance in circles, show off their most elegant legwear-free fashions, and reenact the Great Trouser Toss, a symbolic event where an effigy of a giant pair of pants was flung off a cliff to great applause. The king would sit on his throne, beaming with satisfaction, fanning himself with a velvet sash, legs proudly crossed in the open air. Of course, not everyone was pleased. But those stories will come later. For now, in this quiet moment, all you need to know is this. In a far-off place, in a time where rules made little sense but dreams still mattered, there was once a kingdom where pants were outlawed, and where sleep came easier when the knees were free. And as you drift gently, let the image of a peaceful robe-wearing kingdom fade softly into your dreams. The night is long, the fire is warm, and the story is just beginning. Despite the kingdom's strange new fashion standards, life in Gaulandia remained relatively peaceful. Farmers adapted by tying their tunics higher when working the fields. School children learned to race in flowing robes without tripping, mostly. Even the royal guard, once proud wearers of stiff uniform trousers, marched in synchronized cloaks that flapped dramatically in the wind. But beneath the soft swish of fabric and the smiles at the grand day of bare knees, a quiet resistance had begun to grow. Not everyone was content to let their legs be so free. The movement started, as many rebellions do, with an old librarian. Her name was Agatha Wrinklebone, and she was, without question, the most stubborn person ever to catalogue a scroll. She had lived through 3 kings, 4 royal fire drill reforms, and 17 different ways the nobles tried to tax bookmarks. Agatha had also been wearing trousers, handmade woolen ones, stitched by her late grandmother, every single day of her life since age 5. And now, at the age of 73, she was being told to trade them for something breezy. Agatha was not amused, but she was smart. Rather than protest publicly, she bided her time. She whispered to her fellow librarians. She spoke in hushed tones to bakers, tailors, and a particularly irritated goat farmer named Cedric, who had no patience for tunics in muddy fields. And so was born the Society for the Preservation of Leg Modesty, or SPLM for short. Their mission was simple: bring pants back, one leg at a time. They held secret meetings in the candlelit corners of the Royal Archive, surrounded by dusty tomes and forbidden blueprints of trousers. They called each other by code names like Elastic, Belt Loop, and Zippy. Their symbol, a single upright clothes peg. Their first act of rebellion was subtle. They began inserting hidden messages inside the margins of history books. In the year 1043, Lord Hibbleton wore trousers to battle and was victorious. Archaeological findings suggest that the gods favoured pleated garments. Robes cause excessive chafing. Let freedom ring. The messages went unnoticed by most, but among the quiet readers and scholars, curiosity stirred. Soon whispers returned to the market square. A merchant claimed to have seen a man jogging in something suspiciously like leggings. A tailor accidentally let slip that she'd been commissioned to design a two-legged robe for someone with extreme ankle shame. And one evening, a local child ran through the street yelling, "Mummy, I saw knees with pockets on them." The royal fashion inspectors grew suspicious. They began surprise inspections in shops and homes. They installed knee visibility checkpoints. They even hired an elite squad known as the Robe Enforcers, tall men in extremely long tunics who moved suspiciously fast for people wearing cloth dresses. But the SPLM was always one step ahead. Agatha herself had crafted a secret passage from the library to the royal laundry, a network of tunnels beneath the castle where contraband trousers were hidden in barrels marked turnip soup. No one ever checked them. Nobody liked turnip soup. And yet, something deeper stirred beneath the fabric of rebellion. Some citizens, even those who never particularly liked pants, began to ask, why was the law so important? Was this truly about fashion? Or had King Baldric used this decree to test how much control he had? To see if the people would obey, no matter how absurd? Whispers turned to questions. Questions turned to meetings. And meetings, as they often do, eventually turned into plans. Plans to challenge the rule itself. Meanwhile, back in the royal castle, King Baldric remained blissfully unaware. Each morning, he held court in a silk robe embroidered with little daisies and thunderbolts. He would sip warm turnip tea, still his least favourite flavour, and ask his advisors if anyone had tried to sneak in corduroy again. He believed he had brought peace through proper ventilation. He was proud of his legacy. He was confident the kingdom had fully embraced robe culture. But deep below the castle floor, in the quiet tunnels where time and lint gathered together, the SPLM was preparing for something dramatic. And they had just sewn their first full pair of combat trousers. In the days that followed, the underground resistance, led by Agatha Wrinklebone, moved from whispers to action. Inside the library's deepest chamber, behind a false shelf labelled "Extremely Boring Scrolls, Volumes 1 through 9, sat a worn wooden table. Around it, members of the Society for the Preservation of Leg Modesty gathered nightly, voices low, needles busy, minds plotting. Tonight, they were preparing something bold. Agatha stood at the head of the table, holding up the freshly stitched garments like it was a sacred relic. "The time has come," she said, her voice just above a whisper. "The trousers are ready." A quiet gasp circled the room. Cedric, the goat farmer, still covered in hay and with a tunic that didn't quite cover his knees, nodded solemnly. "We do it at dawn." "No," said Agatha, her eyes gleaming. "We do it at the royal morning stroll." Every citizen of Gowlandia knew the morning stroll. Each Thursday, King Baldric wandered the castle gardens in a majestic robe made of swan feathers and sarcasm. Courtiers and curious citizens often lined the hedges, applauding the king's reflections on dew or grass-blade symmetry. Tomorrow, however, the audience would get a different kind of show. The plan was simple. Cedric would walk casually into the royal garden wearing the forbidden trousers. He would not run. He would not hide. He would simply stand, in public, in pants. The morning arrived with golden mist and trembling nerves. Cedric was calm, if itchy. The pants itched terribly. They had been made from recycled potato sacks. All the good fabric had been turned into robes. Still, they were undeniably trousers. 2 legs, stitched seam, modest hem. Functional. Bold. He stepped onto the gravel path, just as King Baldric rounded the fountain, swan-feathered and smiling. The king's gaze landed on Cedric, then on Cedric's legs, then back up again. There was silence. The courtiers gasped. A noble fainted into a hedge. A royal pigeon flew directly into a pillar. King Baldric squinted. "What is this?" Cedric cleared his throat. "These, your majesty, are trousers, woven with modesty, crafted with pride." There was more silence, this time heavier. The king's face turned a shade of crimson, known only to overripe tomatoes. "You," he said, pointing dramatically, "have committed the most grievous offence against fashion since the feathered sandals of Baron Blib." Cedric bowed. "I accept my punishment, but I request a trial." A trial. The word echoed like thunder across the garden. A trial hadn't been held in Gaulandia since the infamous Great Butter dispute of 20 years past. The idea of debating fashion laws in court sent courtiers into excited whispers and artists into preparation mode. By noon, flyers were posted across the kingdom. The Royal Court of Wardrobe Integrity will hold a hearing. The case of Cedric versus Pants Law. Number 1 robes welcome. Pants pending. The courtroom was packed. Agatha sat quietly in the front row, knitting calmly. Behind her, members of the SPLM had disguised themselves as overly enthusiastic robe designers. One even wore a hat shaped like a folded tunic. Cedric stood in the centre, straight-backed, pants ironed. King Baldric presided from his throne bench, legs crossed dramatically, a magnifying glass in hand. "Let it be known," he declared, "that this court shall determine whether pants are a threat to society, to morality, and most importantly, to the aesthetic of Gaulandia." He turned to Cedric. "You may speak, briefly, and without any flair." Cedric took a breath. "I do not claim that pants are superior, only that they are practical. They guard against goats. They hold small tools. They offer pockets. Your Majesty, pockets. And respectfully, they don't fly up in the wind." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. A baker raised her hand timidly. "My robe once caught fire near the oven." A gardener chimed in. "My tulips don't mind pants. Why should the king?" King Baldric narrowed his eyes. "The law is not about safety," he said. "It is about philosophy. Robes represent flow, freedom, the majesty of movement." Cedric nodded. "But freedom includes choice." The courtroom fell silent. Somewhere in the back, a baby burped. Agatha's knitting paused mid-stitch. King Baldric stared at Cedric, at the courtroom, at his own elaborately robed legs. He sighed. "Very well," he said. "Let the court deliberate. For 2 hours, or until I get peckish." As the court adjourned, a quiet buzz filled the kingdom. Some citizens were hopeful, others skeptical. But all of Gaulandia watched, waited, and whispered about the day a man in pants stood up to a king. What would happen next? Would robes rule forever? Or was this the beginning of a new age? 2 hours passed, then 3, then 5, because King Baldric fell asleep in the deliberation room while attempting to eat a particularly chewy fig. Meanwhile, the kingdom buzzed with anticipation. Outside the courtroom, vendors sold team pants and team robe badges. Children reenacted the Great Garden Showdown with makeshift potato sack trousers and bedsheet cloaks. Even the castle pigeons seemed agitated, flapping in strange formations resembling the letter P. Back inside the royal chambers, the king stirred awake, crumbs on his robe, dignity mildly wrinkled. He had dreamed of pockets, endless pockets, pockets filled with quills, pickles, and mysteriously, one small badger. He sat up straight and rang the bell for his advisers. "Summon the Royal Pockets Council," he barked. This was not a real council, not until that moment. But since the king had declared it, 3 startled nobles were assembled within the hour and handed tiny velvet badges shaped like buttonholes. Their task? To determine if pants, or any bifurcated legwear, could be adapted to royal standards of elegance. The lead advisor, Lord Prindle, cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, we have examined the matter thoroughly. Pockets are undeniably useful." King Baldric raised an eyebrow. "Continue." "They carry seeds, letters, even jam." "Jam?" "Only on Thursdays, sire." The king paced slowly across the chamber, his robe trailing dramatically. "But what of freedom? What of knee expression? What of the sacred breeze?" Lady Vellum, the castle's former embroidery historian, bowed politely. "Sire, may I propose a compromise?" The room fell still. She lifted a scroll with a flourish, revealing a sketch of a new garment. Half robe, half pants. Fully confusing. "We call it the pantaloque." It had the flow of a robe, the division of pants, and, most importantly, adjustable pockets. The king studied the design with great suspicion. "It looks like a skirt that lost a bet." "Yes, sire," she said proudly. The king was quiet. He tapped his chin. He picked up the fig again. He threw it at a nearby tapestry. Then he spoke. "Bring me Cedric." Cedric was, at that moment, helping Agatha organise a secret pants museum in the royal stables. It included such exhibits as the corduroy incident, denim, myth, or menace, and a wax figure of Agatha in her battle trousers. When the summons came, he wiped his hands, straightened his itchy sackcloth pants, and marched back into the courtroom. The king waited alone, seated atop the robed throne, which was essentially a velvet beanbag stuffed with extra lace. "Cedric," he said, "I have decided." The room held its breath. "Pants are still banned." Cedric blinked. "However," the king continued, "I am open to evolution." He held up the scroll. "Henceforth, the citizens may choose to wear pantaloques, so long as they attend a brief re-education session at the Royal Institute of Legwear Harmony." Cedric opened his mouth to object. "But," the king interrupted, "should they wish to continue wearing robes, that is also acceptable." He stood. "Gaulandia shall become a place of fabric freedom, but only in the regulated sense of optional style conformity." Cedric stared at him. "So, pants are allowed?" The king flinched. "Pantaloques." Cedric sighed. "Close enough." The announcement was made that evening. Trumpets played. Fireworks launched. One misfired and exploded in the soup cauldron, giving the turnip stew a delightful smoky flavour. The people rejoiced, not because they hated robes, but because they were finally free to choose. Some kept their tunics, others wore trousers. A few bold individuals even invented the half pant, worn on one leg only, as a symbol of balance. The next morning, King Baldric himself walked the gardens wearing a custom pantaloque, adorned with sequins and subtle embroidery of his favourite knee. He claimed it was for research. Agatha smiled from the library window. The rebellion had not just stitched together pants. It had sown a new era. The sun rose over Gaulandia to the sound of gentle bells. Not alarm bells, thankfully, but the ceremonial chimes of the first annual Robe and Pantaloque Unity Day. The streets were alive with colour. Children twirled in custom garments stitched by village tailors. Elders swapped stories of life before the no-pants decree, and banners fluttered in the breeze. Legs together, fabric forever. In the heart of the capital, an unlikely building had just opened its doors. The Museum of Forbidden Fashion, curated by none other than Agatha Wrinklebone, now widely recognised as the quiet architect of wardrobe rebellion. The museum was housed in what used to be the Royal Goat Stables, freshly scrubbed, pleasantly scented, and now full of mannequins wearing the most infamous pants in Gowlandian history. The centrepiece, a slightly lopsided display titled The Hero's Hem, showcasing Cedric's original potato sack trousers, complete with accidental burn marks from the fig fireworks stew incident. Visitors queued for hours. There were galleries on. The evolution of pockets with functioning samples. The tragedy of the velvet jumpsuit, banned not for legality, but for excessive static. And a rather controversial piece called The Emperor's New Trousers, which was just an empty mannequin with a tasteful disclaimer. Outside, King Baldric cut the ribbon, dramatically of course, while wearing an extravagant pantaloak that trailed behind him like a curtain in the wind. He posed for portraits. He waved awkwardly at babies. He even nodded politely at Agatha, which in royal language was the equivalent of a standing ovation. But beneath the celebrations, something curious stirred. You see, fashion freedom, though celebrated, had created questions. Should there be length limits on pantaloques? Could robes have secret leg divisions and still count as robes? Were leggings treason or merely misunderstood? To address these concerns, the king called together a new governing body, the Council of Fabric Ethics. It consisted of Agatha, chairwoman emeritus, Cedric, head of practical wear, Lady Vellum, keeper of stylish logic, and one very confused tailor who only spoke in rhymes. Their mission was to maintain balance in Gowlandia's blossoming fashion democracy. Their first act? To draft the Trouserial Charter, a light-hearted yet legally binding document that outlined the right to robe, the right to pant, the right to invent combinations thereof, provided no one tripped on the hem in public places. They also established the annual Legwear Festival, where citizens would parade their favourite outfits and vote for categories such as most breezy yet secure, best use of pockets in a formal context, and most likely to confuse a tourist. As the years passed, Gowlandia thrived. Tourism doubled. The economy bloomed. Tailors became local celebrities. Children now grew up with stories not of sword fights or dragons, but of fashion debates and heroic garment choices. In schools, students wrote essays titled, "What My Pants Say About Me." Even Sir Whiskerbottom, the royal cat, was granted a tiny ceremonial pantaloque, which he immediately rejected, but the gesture was appreciated nonetheless. And in the library, Agatha sat peacefully beneath a window, stitching quilt patches from bits of old trousers and robes, now side by side in fabric harmony. She would look out sometimes across the peaceful streets and smile. The revolution had never needed torches or armies, just thread, patience, and the simple belief that freedom could come in many fabrics. It was a warm, drowsy afternoon in Gowlandia when the messenger pigeon arrived, rather dramatically, through the window of the Royal Tailors Guild. The scroll tied to its leg bore a golden seal, a needle crossing a spool of thread, the unmistakable symbol of the International Committee for Garment, Innovation and Peace, ICGIP. Inside, the letter read, "To the esteemed kingdom of Gaulandia, you are formally invited to present your most revolutionary fashion creation at the annual Garment Summit hosted this year in the kingdom of Silkrendia. Sincerely, the Grand Stitch Master of ICGIP, King Baldric, was overjoyed. This is our chance to show the world," he said, "that Gaulandia has not just survived the trouser turmoil, but emerged elegantly evolved." His advisors nodded cautiously. Cedric looked sceptical. "Do they even have robes in Silkrendia?" "No," said Agatha from behind a teacup. "They wear tunic capes." Everyone shuddered. Preparation began immediately. The Royal Council of Fabric Ethics assembled in full. Ideas flew. Cedric proposed double-sided pants, reversible in case of soup spills. Lady Vellum recommended capes, with hidden emergency shorts. Agatha quietly designed something bold, a pantaloque with integrated snack compartments. After weeks of debate, sweat, and 2 accidental sewing injuries, the final entry was chosen. It was dubbed the Pantaloac 3.0 Diplomatic Edition. A stunning blend of flowing robe and structured trousers, it featured adjustable leg vents for breezy diplomacy, an embroidered sash depicting Gaulandia's history, including a tiny goat in pants, and a ceremonial pocket that, when opened, played the Gaulandian national anthem, albeit slightly off-key. King Baldric would wear it himself. And so, the royal air barge was packed with outfits, honour, and enough turnip snacks to last a week. And the delegation floated proudly toward Silkrendia. Silkrendia was overwhelming. Tall, shimmering towers of woven silk, fountains that sprayed perfume instead of water. Citizens floated by on invisible thread lifts. Even the dogs wore monocles. At the summit hall, dozens of kingdoms had already arrived. There were the plaid barons of Tartanland, who never matched on principle, the minimalists of Blankovia, whose outfit was simply imagination, and the Formalians, known for starched collars so stiff they could slice bread. When King Baldric entered in his Pantaloac 3.0, there was a collective gasp, and then scattered applause. At first, the other delegates were skeptical. Some whispered, "What is it?" Others muttered, "Is it confused?" But when Baldric demonstrated the anthem pocket and a small snack tray popped out containing tiny jam scones, well, hearts began to soften. The final judging would be conducted by the Grand Stitch Master herself, a tiny woman named Madame Thimble, who had once sewn a wedding veil so long it had its own zip code. She examined each entry. She tugged at collars. She squinted at seams. She sniffed a sock. No one dared ask why. When she reached Baldric, she stared for a long time. Finally she whispered, "You. Are you the one who banned pants?" The room fell still. Baldric stood tall. "Yes, and I unbanned them too." A pause. Then Madame Thimble gave the smallest of nods. "Growth," she said. "Imperfect stitching, but bold. I respect that." And with a flick of her measuring tape, she declared, "Gaulandia, winner of the Innovation Prize for Courage and Comfort." The kingdom erupted in celebration. Back home, banners flew that read, "First in fashion, first in forgiveness. Comfort is a crown." Cedric received an honorary medal, shaped like a button. Agatha was offered the position of chief fashion diplomat, which she declined in favour of building the world's first fabric philosophy library. And King Baldric? He retired his old robe and wore his prize-winning pantaloque to every event thereafter, even bedtime. Gaulandia had once been a kingdom divided by cloth. But now it was stitched together by choice, change, and very well-tailored seams. The celebration in Gaulandia lasted 7 days. Trumpets tooted, dancers danced, though cautiously. Pantaloques were still new and trippable, and King Baldric personally knighted a turnip farmer who had once bravely stitched a side pocket during a thunderstorm. The kingdom was happier, more expressive, and certainly more colourful. But not everyone was pleased. Far to the north, in the frosty village of Hemfold, known for their extra-long robes and pinions preserved in salt, a movement was brewing. They called themselves the Robe Loyalists. Their motto: let fabric flow, let trousers go. Their leader, a stern figure named Dame Stiffle, had worn the same ceremonial robe for 53 years, laundered twice. From her stone cottage, filled with mothballs and judgment, she watched Gaulandia's new era with growing dismay. Pockets, she scoffed. What next? Zippers? Buttons that sparkle? She gathered her followers, mostly cousins, all named Jeff, and declared a mission: to restore the singular dignified drape of true Gaulandian robes, and to unpant the land once more. Word reached the capital quickly. It always did, thanks to the Royal Pigeon Express, now upgraded with tiny satchels. King Baldric read the parchment aloud in the royal breakfast room, still in his bedtime pantaloques. To his trousered highness, he read, cease this stitch witchery, or face a march of the robes. He blinked. That rhymes. Cedric looked up from a plate of toasted jam pockets. Is it an actual threat, or more of a fabric-based haiku? Agatha sipped her tea. I've known Dame Stiffle. Once tried to ban scarves. Said they were emotional sleeves. She means business. The king sighed and stood up. His pantaloque squeaked slightly. Summon the council, and the royal seamstress, and perhaps a poet. 3 days later, Dame Stiffle arrived. The city paused as her procession marched in silence. No music, no feathers, only the swish of determined robes and the sound of judgment being quietly muttered. She approached the castle steps. I come, she announced, to restore tradition, to protect knees from mockery, to remind this land what dignity looks like. And it does not have inseams. The people murmured. The king descended the steps, his prize-winning pantaloque catching the morning light like a wearable sunrise. He raised his hand. Dame Stiffle, he said, we do not wish to battle thread with thread. This kingdom now embraces choice. Pants are allowed, not required. She frowned. But they invite chaos. A baker shouted from the crowd. My scones rise better in trousers. A young girl raised a hand. My robe caught a bee once. I cried for an hour. Even one of the Jeffs coughed and mumbled, I secretly enjoy belt loops. Dame Stiffle's jaw twitched. The king gestured gently. You are welcome in Gaulandia, always, but not to rule its closets. We wear what suits us best, and that's as close to truth as any fabric gets. She stared, then turned, then dramatically flung her robe behind her, which caught on a lamppost and made a rather unfortunate rip. The silence was thick. The little boy gasped. Her robe has a seam. Gasps all around. Stiffle's eyes widened. That's not... I mean, it's... But the damage was done. The seam of shame had been exposed. Later that evening, as twilight cloaked the rooftops, the king sat in the royal gardens with Agatha and Cedric. She'll be all right, Agatha said softly. Even fabric rebels need time to soften in the wash. Cedric nodded. Maybe next year she'll invent a hybrid, a robeloque, or a pantarobe, or a very fancy towel. They chuckled. Above them, fireflies blinked like tiny stars. A breeze stirred the trees, and from somewhere in the city, a music box played the anthem of a kingdom once divided, now held together by comfort, choice, and a lot of thread. Gaulandia had not only learned how to stitch pants, it had stitched peace. A year had passed since the great reconciliation of robes and pants. Gaulandia, once torn at the seams, now flowed with fabric harmony. The cobblers whistled, the seamstresses hummed, and even the palace dogs wore matching legwear, two-legged or four, depending on their mood. And as the leaves began to blush with autumn's touch, a special celebration approached. National Wardrobe Freedom Day. It was to be a grand affair. The royal square would be draped in golden banners. Street food vendors prepared items like threaded turnip twists and velvet pudding. A stage was built for the first official fashion theatre reenactment of the infamous moment when Cedric first stood in pants before the king. Agatha had curated a walking exhibit titled A Tapestry of Trousers, featuring tiny stitched portraits of all the heroes of fabric unity, including a stitched version of Jeff Number 3, whose only notable contribution was falling into a laundry basket and emerging enlightened. But, as with all festivals in Gaulandia, something strange was bound to happen. It began, innocently enough, with a washing mishap. You see, the royal wardrobe was undergoing its ceremonial cleaning in preparation for the event. King Baldric had insisted on wearing his original robe, the very same one he wore during the infamous Trial of the Trousered. Unfortunately, no one had touched that robe in a year, and the royal launderer, eager but inexperienced, mistook it for a wool-blend nightgown and washed it in hot goat milk, a method popular only in a distant land known for itchy fashion. The results? The robe shrunk, not a little, a lot, from majestic ankle length to a suspicious tunic that barely reached the king's knees. When Baldric saw it, he held it aloft like a fallen banner of glory. "What is this?" he cried. "Your robe, sire," whispered the launderer, but smaller. The king turned to Cedric. This is sabotage, or worse, tailor error." Cedric tilted his head. "Could we call it an opportunity?" Agatha chuckled from the doorway. "Sire, you now possess something truly rare. A robette." "A what?" "A robe, but in miniature. Trendy, breezy, possibly scandalous." The king blinked. "Is it legal?" Cedric opened the trouserial charter. "Technically, yes, though there's a footnote about knees of excessive visibility." Baldric sighed and looked at his reflection in the polished armour of a guard. He adjusted the hem. He tried a dramatic pose. It was oddly liberating. He turned back. "Fine, but I want a belt, and maybe leggings underneath." The room gasped. "Leggings, sire. Why not? Today we celebrate choice, don't we?" And so, on the morning of the festival, King Baldric appeared on the palace balcony in a robette, golden leggings, and a sash that read, "Fabric for all." The crowd cheered. Confused, certainly. Inspired? Absolutely. Even Dame Stiffle, now a peaceful scarf maker, clapped politely from the sidelines, her robe tastefully accented with a pantaloke patch stitched by one of the Jeffs. The festival was a dream. Pants jousting with feather swords, robe dancing, high risk, high entertainment. A choir of tailors singing the national anthem in 4-part harmony, one part entirely in fabric puns. As night fell, candles flickered along the streets, and laughter danced in the breeze. Agatha and Cedric sat atop a hill overlooking the city, sipping tea from mismatched mugs, one shaped like a pocket, the other like a spool of thread. Cedric smiled. Who would have thought? A kingdom once afraid of pants, now wearing leggings and robes with snack compartments. Agatha nodded. It was never about fabric. It was about fear and choice and perhaps overly dramatic decrees. They both chuckled. Far below, the king twirled in his robette leggings hybrid, leading the final parade of the evening. He may have once banned pants, but now he wore what he liked, and the kingdom, stitched together by silliness, softness, and sincerity, followed suit. The peace and comfort of Gaulandia's fashion-forward kingdom rolled on like a soft bolt of velvet, until one crisp morning a royal messenger arrived bearing a scroll tied with a red ribbon and sealed with an emblem unfamiliar to most. It bore the image of a bare arm flexing heroically under the sun. Cedric squinted. That's either a bicep or a poorly drawn potato. Agatha took the scroll and read aloud. To His Majesty King Baldric of Gaulandia, I, King Bront of the Kingdom of Beramsia, extend an invitation to visit our land. We have heard of your recent relaxation of dress codes. Let it be known that in Beramsia we too believe in freedom, the freedom of the shoulder, but pants are a slippery slope. Let us talk before sleeves return and chaos reigns. Bring robes if you must, but no cuffs, no collars, no cowls. We are a sleeveless people, in muscular solidarity, King Bront the Bold. There was a pause. Then Cedric whispered, "This could be our most confusing diplomatic mission yet." 2 days later, the Gaulandian delegation arrived by stitched air balloon, floating gently towards the warm sands of Beramsia, a land of sun, sun lotion, and ceremonial vests. They were greeted by King Bront himself, a tall, tanned man whose arms were indeed astonishing. Muscular, yes, but more importantly, entirely uncovered. His court stood behind him in perfect formation, all sleeveless, all slightly sunburnt, all very, very serious. "I welcome you, cloth-weary brethren," Bront boomed. "I see you wear arm prisons." He gestured at Baldric's flowing robe, which had sleeves, albeit airy ones. Baldric adjusted his cuffs and smiled. "Good sir, in Gaulandia we believe in comfort and creativity. Some enjoy sleeves, others prefer breezy limbs. We have a saying, let the limbs breathe, but don't leave the knees out to freeze." Bront's brow twitched. Poetry. That evening the two kings dined beneath a vast canopy of woven palm leaves. The menu included roasted squash, arm-shaped breadsticks, and freedom salad, with no dressing, of course. Over bites and bargaining, a strange respect began to grow. Bront confessed that he once wore sleeves, a childhood tunic with ruffles, in fact. "They mocked me," he said quietly. "Called me roughly Bront. I tore them off and never looked back." Baldric nodded. "I banned pants out of fear, then wore them out of freedom. We learn, don't we?" There was silence. Then Bront stood and raised a goblet. "To mistakes, and to fabric freedom." Everyone cheered, even Cedric, who was secretly wearing novelty socks with sandals. The next day, Gaulandian tailors and Beramsian weavers held a joint fashion showcase. They revealed a new design. The robelet, a robe with detachable sleeves and optional leg panels. Comfortable, stylish, confusing. But the crowd loved it. Together, the two kingdoms signed a new treaty. The Accord of threads and tendons, which guaranteed that no one would be forced to wear or not wear sleeves, pants, collars, or even the mysterious garment known only as the shrug. As the sun set over Berarmsia, King Baldric stood at the border, ready to return home. Bront shook his hand firmly. "You're not so bad, Sleeve King." "And you, my friend," Baldric smiled, "are welcome in Gaulandia any time. Shirt optional." Bront chuckled. "As long as I can bring sunscreen." They laughed, and behind them their people mingled. Arms out, legs wrapped, fabrics flowing. Once more Gaulandia had grown, not by conquering, but by listening. Not with rules, but with robes and respect. Autumn turned to winter. Snowflakes twirled like falling scraps of lace across the rooftops of Gaulandia, each one landing gently, quietly, like well-placed buttons on the hem of a story nearly finished. Inside the palace, the hearth crackled softly. The air smelled of cinnamon thread cakes and wool-scented tea. King Baldric sat in his study, wrapped in a robe layered over his ceremonial pantaloic, the very outfit he had once declared treasonous. In his lap lay a worn book, Decrees and Regrets, a king's threadbare guide to leadership. On the cover, someone had doodled a pair of dancing pants. The king chuckled. He thought of the journey, from banning pants to defending pantaloques at the International Garment Summit, to earning the cautious respect of Dame Stiffle and the sleeveless Bront, to presiding over a kingdom that now held Choose Your Fabric Fridays. Once he had tried to control identity through wardrobe. Now he encouraged his people to wear who they were, inside and out. A gentle knock interrupted his thoughts. It was Cedric, holding 2 mugs of peppermint thread tea. "The council is gathering," he said, "for the final vote on tomorrow's festival theme." Baldric raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Leggings versus tunics?" Cedric grinned. "Worse. Glitter. There's a strong sparkle lobby this year." The king sighed. "As long as no one proposes sequined pyjamas again." They walked the halls side by side, warm torchlight bouncing off polished tiles. The palace, once draped in formality, now had cheerful clutter, yarn sculptures, embroidered poetry, a robe folded into the shape of a swan. In the great hall, Agatha awaited them, beside a loom twice her height. "I've finished it," she said with a soft smile. She stepped aside to reveal her masterpiece, a tapestry, stretching from floor to ceiling, showing the entire tale of Gaulandia's fashion journey. Each panel wove a piece of their past, the king holding up a decree, face serious, but his robe too long. Cedric standing nervously in pants for the first time. Agatha behind a curtain, smirking with her scissors. Dame Stiffle's shocked expression when her robe caught on the lantern. And finally, King Bront and King Baldric clinking goblets beneath the stars. At the very bottom of the tapestry, stitched in golden thread, "Wear what fits your heart." The room grew quiet. Even Jeff number 7, now the royal pyjama minister, dabbed his eyes with a soft linen sleeve. Later that night, Baldric stepped onto the palace balcony. The snow has softened the world to a whisper. In the courtyard below, children tossed fabric scraps into the air like confetti, pretending to be tailors of the stars. He took a deep breath. "Do you ever miss the old days?" Cedric asked, appearing beside him. The king tilted his head. "When I ruled with iron hems, declared knees shameful, hunted down trousers like criminals?" Cedric sipped his tea. "Yes, those." Baldric smiled. "Number I prefer these days, even if leggings confuse me." They stood in silence, watching the stars. From somewhere deep in the castle, a music box began to play. Slow, off-key, but heartfelt. A lullaby sewn from mismatched notes. A perfect imperfection. And so, Gaulandia rested. Not because it had no more problems to solve, but because it had learned how to listen, how to laugh, and how to let go of what no longer served it. Even if that thing was a robe. In time, the tale of the pants-banning king became legend, told at bedtime, embroidered into blankets, and whispered between stitches on cold nights. And the kingdom, stitched together by story, slept soundly under its patchwork sky.